When we say the seven branches, seven branch prayer, so like I said, it's more than just prayers. And also, sometimes we're a bit, as translators, we're a bit reluctant to use words like prayer, since it's, you could say, somewhat theistic in its implications. But sometimes we just end up with these terms, and I would say it's probably easier to get used to it than to be, you could say, offended with some of the sort of conventions we come up with in terms of translations. Anyway, here we are in the company of the sublime Thinley Norbu, while briefly lent this precious human body's white sail, pushed by clean-intentioned gentle wind without turning back towards miserable samsaric deserts, and making the error of missing this chance, try to receive virtue's jewel by crossing the waves of ocean mind to the serene continent of the triple gem, since doing this is more meaningful than anything else. So, we have here a well-known quote. You'll see it very often in works like Words of My Perfect Teacher and so forth. And it reflects the pragmatism of the Vajrayana Buddhist approach. Absolute inherently born wisdom mind only comes from the handprint of the purification of obscurations and great accumulation, or from being blessed by a highly realized guru. You must know that to try to depend on another method than that is foolish. So when we say absolute inherently born wisdom mind, we here mean actually the realization of this wisdom mind. And we're talking about then that we need to rely on two things really: purification and accumulation. And this we find in all Buddhist vehicles. And then, of course, particularly in the Vajrayana, the path of blessings, we depend on the blessing from a highly realized guru. And it's interesting here, Thinley Norbu, he actually says or. Normally it's translated with and. So normally we think of this in terms of three things that we need: purification, accumulation, and blessing. But Thinley Norbu justifiably puts it that we could simply be blessed by a highly realized guru, and there are many incidences of exactly that. Then again, to receive the blessings in such a way by a great guru, we could also say comes from previous purification and accumulation. Anyway, these are really indispensable aspects of method, and so today we're going to be discussing these aspects of method. So in the text, then, Rinpoche refers to abiding in soul awareness light mind, meaning basically the practice of Dzogchen, Mahasandhi, Mahaati, Ati Yoga. The Mahasandhi path is abiding in soul awareness light mind. Yet, few are that gifted, and hence the need to accumulate the conditions for such practice. So absolute reality in itself, it doesn't require any conditions. And it is rather the path to the realization of that nature that requires conditions. Then again, and that's general, but then again, in the Mahasandhi practice, we actually take the recognition of that very nature as the path. And hence, this path does not require anything besides simply abiding in that state. But to be so gifted as to be able to abide in this way is admittedly rare. And so most people cultivate the qualities of the path gradually through cultivating or accumulating then the two accumulations, merit and wisdom. Mahasandhi practice is actually accumulation in the sense that it's accumulating wisdom or unveiling wisdom, achieving realization of wisdom. But when we then would talk about that as accumulation, we certainly aren't talking about any perceptible accumulation. According to the other vehicles, according to the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, then we do need to acknowledge our situation of our dualistic perceptions and so forth, and the paths there, they reflect this gradual path of integrating dualistic phenomena, and this is then through accumulation, which are the ways that we accumulate in these vehicles is then through skillfully transforming our perceptions. So basically this all comes down to the two aspects of all Buddhist paths, which is wisdom and method. There are countless ways to accumulate merit, yet all are joined in the seven-branch prayer. We unfortunately overlook the value of such practice. Excuse me. So in the general vehicles and also in the Vajrayana, there are countless methods to accumulate merit. And the seven-branch prayer is a very common way to join all these different skillful methods. And yet, due to our materialism, we very often validate this tangible, ordinary mind and its perception much more valuable than the intangible Buddha nature. And as a result, we actually, you could say, disconsider or neglect such practices, and we neglect them because we just don't appreciate this, the Buddha nature, this intangible nature. And so we're going to be seeing here in Thinley Norbu Rinpoche's presentation that before going into the actual practice of these seven branches, he actually dedicates quite some time to give us the context and the big picture of what we're actually doing, what is the object of these practices and their significance, how to actually identify what we're doing, and specifically what is the objective and the object of the practice. Often our practice is undertaken for the wrong reasons. We overlook the intangible gains of the path of enlightenment. So you could say our materialist outlook or our nihilist views, it results in, for example, philosophers using the Dharma to assert their intellectual knowledge, that we simply just regard Dharma as something that's known as an object, and yoga practitioners who use the Dharma in order to strive for a good body, like the yoga aspects of Vajrayana practice. And then we have retreatants that create or count the time they've been in retreat and make that their credentials for accomplishment, saying I did this many years, or I did this many months, and so forth. And then we also have students of great teachers that merely associate with great teachers just because they like to gain status. They'd like to be associated with such teachers and be seen with them and so forth. And all of these aspects are examples of how Dharma practitioners, they overlook the actual intangible objectives of the path and of enlightenment. It's often when we hear the highest teachings that they are objectified by intellectuals, and these teachings then become cliches. They lose their value. And this can end with a very nihilist and destructive attitude that rejects the accumulations of merit. So it's better to stick with increasing the merit of continuous mind. So remember here, when we say continuous mind, we're talking about the relative mind, yet its quality being not physical, not material, is not limited to just this particular embodiment in this particular body and this particular life. So we want to appreciate that as beginning students, it's really disastrous when we employ terms such as, and this is not that well known outside of, you could say, the circles of those who have studied Madhyamika, but very often we come across these terms such as freedom from conceptual constructs or mental activity, or freedom from elaborations, which are terms that are used in Madhyamika and also Mahamudra and Dzogchen. It really just refers to the Dharmadhatu, the aspect that is beyond our objectifying practice and dualistic mind. So that's one word that very often just gets thrown around by persons who have just been exposed to bookish Dharma. And then also we have, and that's a bit more in sort of the department of those who've been exposed to the pith instructions, pervasiveness of natural mind, which is more Mahamudra, or beginning, how does we say, liberation from the beginning, original liberation, which is then more Dzogchen terminology. So all of these terms, then beginning students might just use them instead of connecting with the actual meaning through practice. So such beginners, or you could say confused students, they trivialize teaching, and they might end up developing arrogant, jaded attitudes and reject the accumulation of virtue and merit. In effect, they don't see the sacred quality of their ordinary everyday phenomena. They don't go beyond their own projections, and they miss the opportunity to transform these perceptions into the skillful means for enlightenment. And sometimes you could say you can't blame them if their teachers have been very generous with advanced teachings on non-action and so forth, then it just becomes synonymous with the Dharma. People are only familiar with Dzogchen, or only familiar with Mahamudra and so forth. Then these kind of practices are used as a glib excuse for not actually practicing. So lacking the accumulations of merit, such persons gather the garbage of samsara. So we need to be more sophisticated than that. So rather than being stuck with our narrow ideas that lack skillful means, we need to increase what Rinpoche calls the summer waters of merit with awareness of continuous mind and the laws then that govern it, understanding the principles of karma and understanding the principles of accumulating merit. Some think that it's useful to offer to imagine Buddhas, but anything we perceive is in fact imagined. Until enlightenment, all our experience is imagination. So everywhere in the various Buddhist traditions, Buddhas are bowed to. Their offerings are made to. People make offerings on shrines and so forth. And the objective is to create the conditions for the attainment of enlightenment. But without an appreciation of the object of such respect, that it's ultimately beyond the duality, such as a person making the offering and the recipient or the object of offering, without that appreciation and the skillful means then in integrating the relative experience as methods of the path, without having these kind of, you could say, tools and perspectives, then some people think, or they get the wrong idea, that all of this is just a nice imagination. It's just a nice, great narrative that is there in order to create meaning in our lives or whatever, and that it's not really seriously going to lead to anything. It's just an empty ritual. The idea is it's an empty ritual, but it's sweet and it's acceptable, but it's actually pointless. So if we actually look what it means and what this actually does in terms of impacting our relative mind, then we will experience how the conventional creations with the imaginary mind actually have an impact. They have a conventionally real impact on the conventional mind that we experience. So until enlightenment, everything we experience actually comes from the imaginary mind. Everything that we perceive are dualistic projections. So to use these dualistic projections skillfully to increase positive phenomena and the conditions for enlightenment, this is common to all Buddhist paths. But as we shall now see, the Vajrayana skillful means they accord with ultimate truth. When we visualize deity, it's not just the positive thoughts, it's also indicative or reflections of the manifest qualities of enlightenment. The imagination of the path connects us with the intangible qualities of Buddha nature. This benefits both us and others from now until enlightenment. So ordinarily imagination is understood as leading nowhere, but the imagination that employs prayers, offerings, visualizations, and mantra connects us with the inconceivable qualities of Buddha nature. It invokes positive energy that benefits both ourselves and others in this and all lives until enlightenment. So when we practice the 7 branch prayers and all these various practices such as visualization, mantra, and so on, it's connecting with something that we already have a disposition for, this Buddha nature. Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he uses at one point, when speaking about discipline, he uses the example of a young lion who's never tasted meat, but because being a lion, the first time the mother gives the young cub some meat, it actually awakens a disposition in this young lion, and it eats it with great facility. And this then is due to this abiding innate disposition. So similarly also, practices such as mantra and so on, these invoke then the abiding potential that we possess. There is a huge difference between the ordinary and the sublime. Yet beings cling to the ordinary. Yet it is sublime qualities that render us invincible. So Thinley Norbu says in the text, instead of consoling ourselves with heavy ordinary objects, we can transform our experiences into light deity phenomena. So there's a big difference between the sublime and the ordinary, yet out of our habit, we gravitate towards what is ordinary, and we actually gravitate towards what makes us suffer. We have a choice, but we seem to choose this more narrow phenomena. And it's interesting, some time ago I came across this, I don't know, when I was preparing this last time, I came across this quote from a well-known Jungian psychologist called James Hillman. And he says, we're psychically numbed. We numb our senses from morning till night, whether it's with noise or loud music or light at night. We rarely see the beauty, and if we've lost the feeling of the beauty of the world, then we're looking for substitutes. As Eric Hoffer says, you can never get enough of what you really don't want. End of quote. So Hillman continues, we rush around permanently needy and don't know what it is we've lost. What we've lost is the beauty of the world. We make up for it by attempting to conquer the world, to possess the world. So this actually reflects what Thinley Norbu is also speaking about here, are gravitating towards habitual objects and projections. So instead of consoling ourselves with these heavy ordinary objects, we have the choice, the freedom, to actually transform our experience into what he then calls light deity phenomena, which is not obscured or narrow, and which possesses this sacred dimension. This does, however, require that we understand and apply this insight, not just in a voyeuristic way with some hesitation, but rather, as Rinpoche says, believing and trying. When we practice, we are invincible. It's like being under the water when it rains. Visualization is a profound way of transforming our karmic phenomena into pure phenomena. It requires faith and perseverance. So visualization practice is not entertainment, but to awaken or make our ordinary perceptions into a vehicle to see actual reality. Through belief, or rather, you could say in the view that we've established as per two things really. One is faith, but the other is also reasoning, and also very much the inspiration or blessing of a teacher. But having that, you could say, lack of hesitation, we actually have the means to take our ordinary perceptions of ourselves and what constitute ourselves, our body, speech, and mind, and see it in a fresh, undiluted way, as deity, as wisdom body. And using that, and this is typically then what we do in sadhana practice, we purify our perceptions of the realm, meaning the space where we are, and also our energy, our consciousness, and also our thought. We purify all of this into wisdom energy. In this way, we rise above adverse circumstances and always fulfill our dual purposes. Now, the thing about pure or sacred vision is that it conveys a dimension of what is beyond our ordinary, narrow, confined scope of rationality. But the thing here, when we say pure or sacred pure perception or sacred outlook, it actually also implies, the purity here implies that the perception is more accurate, pure in the sense of it's more valid, it's less mistaken. It's like telling somebody with amnesia, let's say Fiona, that she is in fact Fiona. When she begins to imagine or visualize herself as Fiona, that's actually something that is in concordance with the truth. And initially she might just understand this intellectually. People, they sort of tell her in pictures or whatever, they make her understand intellectually, rationally that she is supposedly this Fiona. But she doesn't actually really realize this. But because it's according with the truth, there's no deception in this practice. Similarly, if we visualize ourselves as Buddhas, it's not that we're imposing something upon what we're not. It's actually more in truth and in concordance with the truth than our ordinary, fleeting, conditioned perception of ourselves. And then gradually confusion falls away. If you look in somewhere in the Samadhi-Raj Sutra, I don't have it right here, but there is a story in there where there's a son who then got lost, forgot who he was, and he returns to his father's estate. And the father wants to bequeath him the whole estate, but the son doesn't believe that he is actually the legitimate heir. So the father skillfully actually puts him through working his way up through the various jobs on the estate to eventually then, when he hands the estate over to the son, who is the original legitimate heir, the son actually, due to his amnesia and not remembering, he, thanks to the skill of the father and having gone through all of this, he actually accepts it and recognizes that he is the qualified inheritor. So in this way also in the Buddhist teaching, all the Buddhist teachings are really just showing us what we already are. And so Vajrayana particularly banks on the practitioners trusting that they in fact are, you could say, legitimate heirs or possessors of this wisdom nature. And so they're empowered to make this recognition their path through the practice of sadhana. Now with faith, we can use our attachment to cultivate sublime qualities. When benefit arises, we cut the attachment to such signs. This transforms attachment into non-attachment. We need an object of faith, something that arouses enthusiasm, and so we cultivate faith in the pure qualities of the deity to generate this kind of enthusiasm about the practice. This might come naturally. We might be naturally drawn to the Vajrayana deities, or we might have to be proactive in generating such faith in the deity or in the teacher. But when these signs of faith arise, such as joy and rejoicing and so on, then we also cut the attachment to these experiences to avoid some sort of self-righteous attachment. And we then merge this experience of deity with the absolute space of wisdom. We recognize that ultimately this is not something that we can cling to in a dualistic way. But the practice is something that transforms our habit of attachment into the attachment through the path of seeing the objects in terms of their wisdom nature. So if we have the connection, our sadhana practice enables us to merge with wisdom. If we can practice the tantric path without duality between the deity and the object and ourselves, in the sense that if we can practice the path, and this particularly refers actually to what we call Mahayoga, or the inner tantras in the Nyingma teachings, and the highest Anuttara tantras, if we can practice that without this duality where we have the deity as an object and ourselves as a subject that's different from the deity, when we can practice with that kind of non-duality, then we can practice with any deity that corresponds then to our karmic disposition and gradually increase our pure wisdom phenomena, eliminate our confused projections, and ultimately merge with what we then refer to as the single mandala of wisdom. So this is, you could say, summing up the Vajrayana path, particularly then the Anuttara Tantra path. On such a path, we have the secondary benefits of sublime energy. Accomplishing peaceful deities make us attract beings through being soothing. Through wrathful practice, we attract beings through our fearlessness. Rinpoche gives the example of crops. When we grow crops for the sake of the grain, it comes with the secondary phenomena, secondary products such as stalks and leaves. Likewise, a practitioner striving for enlightenment also experiences the secondary phenomena such as the sublime deity, sublime energy, the qualities that arise out of enlightenment. And these in generally we refer to in terms of wisdom, compassion, and strength. And we have deities that reflect that. For example, the qualities of wisdom, Manjushri, the qualities of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the qualities of strength, Vajrapani. And the wisdom qualities of, in general, peaceful deities are such that they are perceived in terms of being soothing to others. So persons who have, you could say, the practice of practicing peaceful deities, they might very often be perceived as being soothing for other people, while practitioners of wrathful deities, they might be seen in terms of being courageous persons who lead others to enlightenment through their fearlessness. The faith that is the cause of such accomplishment brings greater and vaster intention and greater abilities. So while we're on the path, what enables us to actually practice this kind of sadhana and Vajrayana practice, that kind of faith is something that enhances our being, our magnanimity, and is the basis for then a much vaster vision and also a much vaster intention to benefit others. So we're coming around to 7 o'clock, and I'm not seeing any questions. So if there are no questions, I'm just going to continue. And again, please, if you have questions, you can at any time just type them in using the little question box in the in this, what do we call it, widget. Another thing also, I sent out a mail just to notify you that at the bottom of the slides you have the page and paragraph number, and actually here I've actually also stuck in the first lines of the paragraph, so it should be fairly easy to find your place in the book. So right now we are then at page 139, second paragraph, which starts in the same way that we would ask. So supplications invoke the echo of sublime qualities. our speech fuses with that of the sublime ones, and we can benefit through teaching. So we supplicate sublime beings, such as we have liturgies of supplications where we invoke and supplicate gurus, deities, dakinis, and so forth. Again, I'm using the word supplicate, and some translators, they would insist, refer to these as prayers. We pray to sublime beings and so forth. But don't get caught up on that. Either way, it's an act of devotion in which we invoke through a path of dualism, what is actually present in a non-dualistic way. Now, there's no difference between the person supplicating or invoking and the object. But then again, as long as we are stuck in duality, this is a very skillful method, and we have it not just in Vajrayana, but all across in the various Buddhist cultures. So as we supplicate sublime beings, we supplicate them to guide us to enlightenment. These prayers and chants, they diminish the trouble associated with ordinary speech. When we chant it, we're actually cutting through our ordinary use of our speech in a habitual, ordinary way. So it enhances the power of our speech. And also, when we chant like that, when we supplicate, it rings back the sublime echoes of the celestial songs of wisdom. I have these in my notes. I think this must be Rinpoche's expressions, obviously. And prayers or aspirations, they bring the unity. They bring unity with wisdom speech of the enlightened ones, and they create the conditions that we may teach others. So there's, first of all, that we eliminate the ordinary speech that's weakened by, you could say, all our dualistic, ordinary, habitual chatter, and it also invokes a quality of wisdom, and invokes this quality of wisdom that's innate to us. And ultimately, it also creates the conditions when we achieve enlightenment that we can effectively teach others. Or not just when we achieve enlightenment, but in general. So we go for refuge out of fear of samsara, focusing instead of on the wisdom of the Triple Gem. Here Thinley Norbu says, instead of being distracted by our dualistic mind's paranoid negative projections, if we concentrate towards the pure, positive, most powerful phenomena of the Triple Gems, we will not have even one impure thought, so there will be no more cause of fear. Then our mind will become pure, profound, and egoless, and we can join with the sole, clear, fearless appearances of Buddha's wisdom mind. So we invoke the protection of sublime beings out of fear of samsara. That's a very basic premise that we have when we approach the Buddhist path. We might actually think of ourselves as highly evolved, sophisticated individuals, and we might approach enlightenment in terms of thinking, well, I'd like to enhance my potential, or I like to enhance who I am. I'm already a sort of a brilliant person, but in addition to that, I'd like to be enlightened. And there has to actually be some wariness of our agenda and understand how we create our own suffering through pursuing this habitual celebration of ourselves. That's really the, you could say, our predicament. And so our confusion runs pretty deep, and also our confusion has serious ramifications, which we call wandering in samsara. So without going into that, we just need to recognize that this is a difficult situation, and so when we approach the path, we actually approach the path somewhat humbled with regards to what we're capable of and incapable of, and we go for refuge then in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That's basic to the entire Buddhist path everywhere. So this we need to be clear on that also, because we also are sort of very often lulled into some sort of belief in the permanence of our life or our present situation, just because we have for the time being no immediate problem threatening us. Or we might be too proud then to accept the need to call for help. But the thing is, we call for help all the time. The pipes, they burst, or our car breaks down. So invoking help in this context, which is then a much greater issue, namely our confusion that drives samsaric suffering, is really essential. So it's in fact implicit then in our taking refuge, and however enlightened we might see ourselves, we are in fact refugees, fleeing from the sufferings of samsara. So we shouldn't kid ourselves otherwise. And then recollecting then the flaws of samsara and the benefits of enlightenment, we go for the refuge for the sake of all sentient beings. We're not carried away by our paranoid projections. We focus on the pure wisdom phenomena of the triple gem, and we achieve then the corresponding result of the fearless liberation of wisdom. So it's funny because very often we don't really want to change much, and we'd like to provide the status quo, thinking we're somewhat all right, there's nothing wrong. But then again, we also, as much as we're stuck with that, which is a little bit our pride, we also have a corresponding lack of imagination that we could actually go beyond our limitations. And so the path, it starts with a recognition of the shortcomings and defects of samsara and how they exist within us. But the path also, you could say, celebrates and points to our potential. And that also we shouldn't you could say, similarly, we shouldn't reject that either. We want to appreciate that the objective of the path is no less than joining with this soul clear, fearless appearance of Buddha's wisdom mind. So this is equally us, if not even more actually our true nature. So this does, however, require that we surrender our egos in order to transform it, meaning our mind. And normal surrender is generally a temporary strategy of ego. We surrender, but just because we see some, you could say, temporary benefit. But here, surrender is final, and it brings endless benefit. So in surrendering ego, this is like it. We give up ego because it's simply not serving our benefit in any way. And when it comes to practice, then, we surrender to sublime beings. Now, when we do that, when we take refuge or we express our appreciation of our teacher, invoking the teacher and the teacher's quality or that of the deity and so forth, this is not ordinary submission. It's not some sort of unhealthy codependency that we're cultivating. It's surrendering our habitual fascination with and subscription to our delusion and our neurosis. It's transforming ego into egoless deity. We have ego of sentient being, and we have egoless, pure, abiding enlightenment in the form of our innate deity. So this is giving up the poverty of our ego's need for confirmation and power and transforming our ego through surrendering it. So we need to appreciate how these two kinds of surrenderings are very different. One is, you could say, viewed as a somewhat pathetic, temporary strategy, and the other actually is about increasing the egoless wisdom power. But it is something that is nourished through an inspiration that we refer to as blessing. But the thing is, this blessing unveils our potential, and as such, then we would say also this kind of practice of surrender is something that is limitless. Even conventionally, we acknowledge others are greater than we. Surrendering to wisdom has endless benefit. Now, in our ordinary world, we let's see here. Yeah, it happens to us in our ordinary conventional practices. And we do, as much as we have all sorts of egalitarian convictions and you could say opinions and so forth. We do actually in this world operate with that there are others who are greater or more powerful or somehow possess qualities, desirable qualities. They have these more than we do. And we shouldn't really fool ourselves otherwise. But as far as what we what we would want to on the Buddhist path, we're actually not that impressed with the ordinary secular powers, and we are much more impressed with the sublime powers of the deity, or the sublime powers of the teacher, or sublime powers of our innate wisdom, and so forth. So um, that kind of surrender has tremendous benefit. Now, genuine surrender requires devotion. Such devotion is the key to ultimate confidence. So when we sometimes in a conventional sense hear of devotion, we think that it's some sort of sycophantic practice where we are making ourselves lesser than we are, while it in fact is the key to, you could say, our liberation and freedom, our ultimate confidence. You could say this whole discussion of surrender, it's based on the experience of devotion. And if we don't have that, then our practice can very easily be a waste of time. But when we talk about surrendering to sublime beings, we're ultimately not objectifying them. So we don't really see the teacher as an external savior, where we would construct ourselves as fans or followers of this idol or charismatic person, and our devotion is actually proportionate to how inferior we feel relative to the sublime being's greatness. So the teacher's role in Buddhism is contrary to that. It's about empowering the student in recognizing what is not tangible, what the student overlooks, namely the subtle dimension of innate wakefulness. And that nature of wisdom cannot be shown by books or logic or rational knowledge. It comes in a moment of openness, surrendering, allowing the teacher to inspire us and to deeply touch us with his or her genuine qualities, as we have in this opening quote then at the beginning of this chapter from Saraha. Such devotion enables experience of the sublime qualities that we revere. Faith and devotion is remaining in the sublime nature of pure awareness. So of course we might have faith and devotion spontaneously, but otherwise we might not have it, and that's just a question of causes and conditions, and then we just need to be proactive in our practice and cultivation of devotion. There's a commentary by Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche called The Wish-Fulfilling Jewel, I think, and it's his explanation of the Guru Yoga, particularly then for the Longchen Yingtik. But in there he actually gives very elaborate explanation on how we can cultivate devotion. So the assumption is not that we're born with devotion or that we're born with all these kind of the sort of the brilliance that recognizes sublime qualities in others. We can't. We are obscured. But we can do something about that. And so devotion is seen as something that we could very well be we cultivate. But above all, in this context here, as we're doing this study, it's important that we recognize the role and the value of devotion, particularly in the context of our egalitarian and anti-authoritarian discourse of our modernity. The devotion of pure, continuous reverence, then, when we have that, it enables surrender. And that surrender enables us to experience why we would actually respect these or, celebrate, even worship wisdom qualities. In pure awareness mind, okay, in absolute, There is no delusion, there's no suffering. And in fact, faith and devotion is connecting us with that kind of awareness. It opens us to this clear, vast wisdom space of the Buddha, to luminous, pure deity phenomena, to our own absolute inner teacher, as where our teacher then, our outer teacher, is seen as inseparable from our own wisdom mind. The sublime, this wisdom mind, is intangible, yet with devotion and reverence we can unveil and manifest this potential. So our mind's Buddha nature is intangible, and when we practice the path, we practice with this visualization or acknowledgement or recognition of this sacred dimension. And this is also then, you could say, creations that correspond to this absolute nature in terms of being intangible. But we need to eventually then join this mind-made, imagined deity with the deity of actual reality. And to do that, we need devotion and reverence to actually take hold of our being and melt away sort of this hard core of our confusion and enable this ever-present meaningful potential to manifest within our own personal experience. And as a result of, you could say, experiencing this manifestation within ourselves, then this will also begin to permeate our perceptions. So this actually is Rinpoche in presenting the subject matter here. Before he gets to the actual, you could say, practicalities of the 7 branches, he actually has devoted the bulk of the space of this chapter simply to give us the context for what we're doing. Now we actually then have the 7 branch prayer. These are then we offer the 7 branches with devotion to the triple gem, applying then prostrations, offerings, confession, rejoicing, requesting the Buddhas to teach, requesting the Buddhas to remain, and then finally dedication. So, so here then we have the general practice of accumulating merit according to the 7 branch prayer. And like I said before, this is what we see in all Buddhist cultures in terms of activity and also in terms of post-meditation practice. When we come to Buddhist cultures and we see temples where people are making offerings and so forth, it looks as if this is sort of a lay people practice and maybe the real practitioners are just doing meditation, but that's not at all like that. The practitioners of meditation in post-meditation, the 7 branch prayer is very much what they engage in. And so overall, these 7 branches, they are the skillful means that enable us to integrate our relative phenomena into the path of enlightenment. So until enlightenment then, with compassion, we surrender and take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the triple gem. And as we do the 7 branch supplication or prayer, we consider for the first one the prostration that we make prostration together with all sentient beings. And prostration we do in order to eliminate our pride. Second, we offer make limitless offerings, particularly with what's called the sky treasure samadhi, which is considering that the offerings that we make, they are not limited to just our physical offerings or limited in any way, that we consider that the offerings are infinite. And we do this to dispel our attachment. We confess in order to abandon the causes for samsara. And these causes of samsara is lack of faith in the Dharma. And doing this dispels anger. We rejoice in the virtues of others. This dispels jealousy. We request the Buddhas to teach. This dispels ignorance. We request the Buddhas to remain until the end of samsara, and this dispels wrong views. And we dedicate any virtue to enlightenment, to dispel doubt. So I'd recommend to revisit these and to just sort of go through this and ponder it and go into that deeply, just as part of our practice, really, to really enable us to have a clear picture of exactly what we're doing. Otherwise, if you're like me, what happens very often in just unconsciousness and lack of mindfulness, one just repeats these as liturgies, just without any awareness, just like a parrot. As far as prostrations go, they express humility and they connect us with the sublime. Moreover, it eliminates pride. Prostrations purify us and bring celestial joy. This is what Rinpoche is teaching here. Prostration expresses humility towards those that possess sublime qualities. Naturally, we respect others, and ordinarily we express that. And here we extend these gestures towards those who are more than ordinary, and this creates the condition for us to attain such sublime nature. We're actually not creating a gap between us and the object of our prostration. On the contrary, we're connecting, and through connecting with the outer object, we are awakening the inner object. Just like if we admire somebody, the moment that we refuse to, we become jealous and alienated when we see somebody having admirable qualities, we actually cut it off. Whereas the moment that we express our appreciation, we become part of that. And so this kind of expression of prostration is actually the opposite of what it looks like. It actually breaks down duality. Moreover, Rinpoche speaks about how bowing with respect enables us to relax. Physically, it enables us to unravel our nadis, our channels, and also it purifies our perception. And so, prostrating to the three jewels, it brings the joy of the deity's celestial form and creates the connection to join with that. So that's prostration. Then offering. Offering to sublime beings enables us to connect with them and receive their blessing. Generosity enables us to exhaust duality and be reborn in pure realms. So we offer to the powerful to honor them in ordinary life, to connect with them, and to benefit from that relationship. We do that in sort of general, small-time, secular contexts all the time somehow. In this context, we connect to sublime beings, which are objects of refuge, to connect with them and receive their blessings. We might be reluctant to offer to what is intangible, us making offerings on shrines, making beautiful shrines and making elaborate offerings. We might think this is ridiculous. There's nobody there. This is completely intangible. When Buddhism was brought to Tibet, people used to make fun of the Buddhists that the deities weren't drinking the water that they were putting up on the shrines and so forth. So in our short-sightedness, we overlook what's the objective of that, and we're perfectly happy to entertain ourselves with our friends, and we give them all sorts of flowers and water and things like that. But to offer to a shrine, we think it's costly or it's a waste of time. Sometimes even we sort of think, oh yeah, I'm offering to it's just a shrine offering or whatever, and then we just give the lesser. We might, for example, buy expensive champagne for ourselves, and for our offerings, we might actually just buy some regular wine or whatever. So in that sense, we're a little bit missing the point here. So offering to powerful sublime beings with the intention to accumulate merit enables us to ultimately release all beings into enlightenment, and it exhausts ultimately also our dualistic mind, the attitude of excluding others, and enables us to be reborn experiencing pure phenomena, pure realm, in order to, or rather through the practice of giving, then our narrow perceptions, our sort of tight perceptions, they are purified, and we perceive in a much more, you could say, expansive and pure way. With confession, we clear up things, we grow in nobility, and we restore our previously made commitments. It dispels habits of deceit and anger and increases honesty, peace, and blessings. Ultimately, confession takes us beyond the relative constructions of right and wrong. So if we don't apologize when things, as they inevitably do, they go wrong between us and others, then things turn sour. And also, we actually miss a chance for nobility. When we actually can acknowledge that we made a mistake, we are noble persons. When we sort of doggedly, stubbornly insist that we were highly justified in doing what we did, even though we know we weren't, then we actually diminish our you could say, being. So not confessing, not apologizing, and so forth, that's actually missing a chance for nobility and restore, you could say, our purity. And this also applies to the spiritual dimension, where if we break vows and commitments, if we don't restore them, then we're stuck with our weakened spiritual commitment. So it's important that as soon as this happens in any given context of the path, we then confess, taking sublime beings as what we call the strength of support. And this enables us then to proceed along the path. Exposing our faults, it also dispels our habit of deceit, it purifies anger, it increases our habit of honesty, it grants peace and blessings, just like moonbeams in the evening after a scorching Indian summer day soothes the lotus flower. Ultimately, confession is non-dual. There's no, the ultimate object of confession and the confessor is not two different things. The purity abides within ourselves. Feeling joy in others' virtue eliminates jealousy. Rejoicing in spiritual qualities is especially important. We share in the merit of their virtue. So when we feel joy in others' qualities, we actually accumulate merit. Some might feel it's absurd, but we enhance our own potential qualities when we rejoice in the qualities of others, and it destroys our selfish jealousy. So especially this is valuable in rejoicing in when there's others who have spiritual qualities. We might be happy for others if they succeed in some ordinary way, but if we see spiritual qualities in others and we rejoice in that, we don't sort of resent that they're sort of have qualities that we don't, then we're actually already tapping into this ourselves. It comes from us actually, you could say, awakening these qualities in ourselves. So we do say that even if we're not practicing, this practice of rejoicing enables us to have the similar benefit or similar merit. We become expansive and accommodating like a bridge. We join in the Buddha's timeless activity. So this is still within the practice of rejoicing. It expands our mind, enables us to accommodate anyone or any circumstances, and we become a bridge. And we are someone that links the Buddha's timeless wisdom activity to our immediate reality. The next is requesting the Buddhas to teach. And we request the Buddhas, without asking for instruction, we stagnate. Ultimately, wisdom goes beyond learning. Requesting teaching is like a sun that dispels the darkness of ignorance and causes wisdom to grow. So we request the Buddhas to teach the path to enlightenment. Even ordinarily, to admit we can learn something is immensely beneficial. Otherwise, we never learn anything. We stagnate. And here, this branch is asking the Buddhas to guide us to destinationless enlightenment. So I'd like to just highlight Thinley Norbu Rinpoche's skill in continually you could say, recapping or reiterating some really profound points, because there's this sense that, oh yes, now we're going to request teachings on how to go somewhere. But right away as we sort of develop that generic image, we might think, oh, I'm not there yet. And that's again where Rinpoche then short circuits this kind of dualistic understanding, and simply just refers to it, inventing, you could say, Rinpoche's sublime English, the term destinationless enlightenment. But then, in terms of requesting the Buddhas, requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, this is something that dispels our obscurations. It's something that takes us out of the sort of the shell or obscuring ordinary condition that we're in. And so us making the move to request teaching is creating the conditions for penetrating this darkness of ignorance. So we compare this exercise to a sun, the sun that dispels darkness, because the clear light of wisdom is what dispels ignorance and causes wisdom to grow, and eventually then blossoming as omniscience and enlightenment. Then we also request the Buddhas to not pass into nirvana. We would do this to anybody that we care for, that we don't want them to go away. This creates much temporary benefit, and it also lengthens the teacher's lives. We ultimately join the wisdom beyond coming and going. Again, we arrive at the non-dual view at the end here. So we implore the Buddhas to remain in our world and guide us, supplicating them to be here for us because we need them, just as we would also supplicate those that we love to please not pass on. So by this act of requesting the Buddhas to remain, or the great teachers to remain, we actually also cleanse residual negative energy. We purify illness and obscurations. There's a lot of benefit in requesting the long life of the teachers. So through that, we gain the conditions for long life. We create the conditions for ourselves living long together with our teachers, and also we bring about an enlivening energy for them. So this requesting the teachers to stay is something that lengthens their lives as well as ours, and ultimately it enables us to create the conditions for realizing the wisdom body that is beyond coming and going, that is beyond birth and death. So dedication is the twofold aim, both temporarily and ultimately. This causes the two kayas of the Buddha. So when we, at the end, then dedicate the merit, its purpose is we dedicate it. For example, we very often will say we dedicate to the long life of the teachers. We dedicate it to so and so who might have obstacles and so forth. So that's, you could say, about the relative aspect. But the absolute kind of dedication of the Bodhisattva benefits both temporarily and also ultimately. It's temporarily something that creates conditions for happiness, and it's also something that ultimately is done without any objectification of the one who dedicates the object and the act of dedication. So it's without any kind of duality. So it ultimately has the ultimate benefit of arriving at a realization of non-duality. So the practice of dedication enables us to achieve what we call the two kayas of the Buddhas, which is the absolute realization, enlightenment, and also the compassionate aspect of manifesting for others, which is the nature, which is the very essence of the Buddhas. The very nature in terms of the manifest aspect of enlightenment is this compassionate manifesting, both in, you could say, the subtle aspect of the Sambhogakaya and also the more conspicuous aspect of the Nirmanakaya. So the The two kayas are then the Dharmakaya of enlightenment and the Rupakaya of manifesting for others. And then the Rupakaya again has these two aspects of Sambhogakaya and Niyamanakaya. So we should aspire to give without the concepts then of subject, meaning the person who is doing the dedication or offering or whatever, without the idea of the object that is receiving it, and also the action, whatever it is that we are offering or dedicating. So whenever we do any practice of giving, we do very often have these three concepts, and it limits us. Thinking in terms of there is someone we're giving to, there is the person, myself, who's giving, and there's something that's being given. We should actually try to go beyond that. We can recognize that sublime beings, one of their qualities is this lack of duality in this regard. They don't think, oh, I'm doing this for so and so. They don't have that duality. And likewise, also when we give to sublime beings, we should aspire that we can give without these three concepts between concepts of subject, object, and action. We should give it without any ambition, without any agenda, without any object of reference. So if we can give and dedicate and so forth, this is, in that way, this brings or creates the conditions for realizing the stainless wisdom of the Dharmakaya. Moreover, through the dedication, then virtue increases and it's never lost, as a drop of water that is put into the ocean. So if we dedicate in this way then, or if we just in general, when we dedicate, it increases the value of our virtue. We've done something good, but we don't sort of hold on to it. We give it away. And that kind of lack of clinging creates the conditions for it actually not being limited. It actually doesn't get lost then. So we have that in a lot of the mystical traditions actually in the world, where we would speak about how the secret of wealth lies in the fact that we give. The more we give, the more we have. And, St. Francis who said the receiving lies in the giver, in the giving. So the image that we have is that when we have a little drop of water, if we keep it there on our finger, it doesn't last long. But if we put that drop into the ocean, it's safe there. It becomes an inexhaustible part of the ocean. And similarly, then, if we do that with our practice of virtue or whatever practice we're doing, if we dedicate it, it becomes inexhaustibly part of the Buddha's omniscient wisdom ocean. So that takes us to the end of today's study on the seven branch prayer. So there's one question here. Can you maybe clarify, referring to page 135 where Rinpoche says, second paragraph, when we're in the formless soul space meditation? Well, soul space meditation, it refers to some of the more advanced styles of vipassana, such as Madhyamika, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen. And the Tibetan term is Tiglin Nyaktik, which would be, you could say, the soul sphere, but it really just refers to non-duality, the simplicity, freedom from conceptual concepts, or freedom from conceptual constructs. So we're not at that time entertaining any notion of someone doing something. We're simply just abiding in confidence in our, you could say, intrinsic purity, without any duality, thinking me and my meditation and so forth. Just settling in simplicity. Is there a particular contemplation or prayer for taking down the water bowls in the context of practicing the prayer of 7 branches? That's actually a good question. You know, we actually have prayers for making the offering. Recently, I was doing a lot of this, and I would actually recite Vajrasattva mantra. But that's just something that I would do. You know, you empty the bowls, and by the way, you start the other way. You know, start on the right side, right? Do it the opposite way, and then you empty them, and then you're drying them. And I would chant the Vajrasattva mantra. But I have to say, I actually don't know what the tradition says on this, so I owe you an answer on this one. All right. I guess that's it. So we'll just dedicate the merit at this point. And actually, since we just were mentioning long life prayer, I should actually include in this the long life prayer for Dungsa Thinley Norbu's reincarnation, who we have with us now. So I'll get that ready next time. Okay. So once again, thank you for joining me in this study. Yeah. For the next time, then please read the first section of the next chapter, which is the transitional states, the yogas, and the kayas. And you read, it's a very long chapter, so I divided it into 3. So read until page 164, where it begins the yoga of luminosity. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and increase ever more and more. Thank you.